The summer of 2018 had started like any other, long, slow, and stretched out with the kind of heat that made sidewalks sticky under bare feet. I was 17, balancing a part-time job at the Maplewood Heights bookstore with an obsession for sketching anything that caught my eye. I had my routines down, mornings at the store, afternoons with my sketchbook under the big oak in my front yard, evenings with Lena sprawled on my floor playing video games or talking about the impossible decisions of senior year. Life was simple, manageable, and I liked it that way. Then Sean showed up. He moved from Chicago, a transfer student who walked through the hallways with that easy confidence that made people tilt their heads, curious. He was tall but not intimidating, with a half smile that made you think he was keeping a secret only he knew. I first noticed him at the library when he asked about a book I had just checked out. Our conversation was light, laughing about the absurdity of my habit of sketching people without asking, and by the end of the week, he'd found every excuse to run into me at the park, the creek, even at the grocery store my mom sent me to for milk. It started harmlessly. Ice cream cones shared on the pier, sitting on the curb laughing about terrible summer movies, late-night texts about nothing in particular. I liked Sean, I'll admit it, but only casually. I wasn't looking for drama or heartbreak. I had my future mapped out, my sketchbook filled with dreams, and Lena by my side as my safe harbor. But by August, the easy warmth of summer was starting to shift. One evening, I sat on the front steps with him as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. "I want more than just summer," he said, voice soft but insistently urgent. "I want you, not just these hangouts." My chest sank. I cared about him, sure, but I had plans, priorities. I told him we should keep things casual. He didn't take it well. His smile faltered, and the playful tone I loved was gone. "You don't mean that," he muttered. His hands fidgeted with the strap of his backpack, jaw tight. "I can make this work. I know you feel it too." I shook my head, and that was the first time I felt the faint thrum of fear under my skin, like a warning I couldn't yet name. Lena appeared with her lemonade awkwardly hovering, sensing the tension. "I've got to go," I said quickly, pulling her with me inside. Sean lingered quiet, watching us with eyes that no longer felt familiar. By the next week, Sean's presence became invasive. I saw him outside the library when I went to study, leaning against a lamppost, and later at the coffee shop with his headphones in, pretending he was there by coincidence. It was never violent, just persistent, and it gnawed at me. One evening, I told my dad, Mark, about it. He listened, calm but firm, and the next day confronted Sean in the driveway when he didn't leave on his own. Voices were raised, a shove exchanged, and Sean was escorted off by Dad and my older brother Ethan. Even after that, I couldn't shake the anxiety. Every glance over my shoulder at school, every whisper in the hallways made my pulse spike. That summer had started as a gentle, sun-soaked freedom and ended with shadows creeping into every familiar corner. After Sean's confrontation with my family, I thought things would settle, that the problem was behind me. But it wasn't. He started leaving notes on my locker, showing up at places I frequented, and even following me along the creek trail I used for sketching. Each encounter was brief, almost casual, but the intention behind it was clear. He wanted me to notice, to feel watched, and to understand that I couldn't escape him. Lena became my anchor. "We'll walk together," she said, fists planted on her hips, eyes sharp. "If he shows up, we ignore him. We get help. We don't engage." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering presence. She was the sister I never had, and somehow just knowing she'd be there made the anxiety easier to bear. One Thursday evening around 8:15 p.m., I saw him again, leaning against my dad's car like he owned the place. My stomach flipped. I ran inside, heart hammering, and Dad came rushing out with Ethan in tow. The confrontation was tense. Sean shoved Dad lightly, the kind of shove meant to provoke without real danger, but Dad didn't back down. He and Ethan held him until Sean's parents arrived to collect him. My hands shook for hours afterward. After that night, the threats escalated. "You'll regret it at school," he whispered one evening when I was leaving my art class. I felt panic curl inside me, tight and unyielding. Every step near school was heavy. Every hallway glance made my pulse spike. It was no longer summer fun. It was a trap, a shadow that followed my every move. I tried talking to teachers, counselors, anyone who would listen, but Sean was always 2 steps ahead, aware of how to skirt rules without technically breaking them. That constant tension ate at me. I could no longer lose myself in sketching or laughter with Lena. My attention was consumed by the fear of the next encounter. Then came the final showdown. On the last day before spring break, he was waiting outside the school entrance. My stomach dropped. My hand gripped Lena's and we walked straight to the front office. Every step felt like walking across a tightrope. Once we arrived, the school acted quickly, suspending him for harassment. Relief washed over me, but the fear lingered, a dull ache in my chest. I realized that even when danger was removed, the scars remained. That spring break, Lena and I tried to reclaim what was lost. Long afternoons sketching, talking about our futures, laughing again. Sean faded from sight, but the summer had left its mark. Trust could be fragile. Fear could creep in quietly. And sometimes the people who seemed harmless at first could turn your world upside down. By the time school started again after spring break, I was hyper-aware of my surroundings. Every time I walked into the hallways, I checked corners, watched shadows, and noticed every movement around me. It was exhausting, but I had no choice. Sean's obsession had left me wary, and I couldn't ignore that instinct. Lena stuck by me, as always, and together we formed a silent pact. We were each other's safety net. Sean didn't completely disappear. I'd hear about him from mutual friends. "He's asking about you," or "He's waiting outside the park." Even when he wasn't physically present, the tension he had instilled lingered like a weight on my chest. One afternoon, while sketching under the oak in my yard, I noticed a shadow in the corner of my vision. My pencil froze mid-stroke. It was him, watching from across the street. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I simply went inside and locked the door, my hands trembling. That summer, I also started spending more time on myself, trying to reclaim the parts of life Sean had overshadowed. I focused on my art, entered a local competition, and even started volunteering at the community center. But every achievement felt tainted by the lingering fear that Sean could appear at any moment. I became cautious with who I trusted, questioning people's motives in ways I never had before. Dad noticed the change. One evening, as I was nervously pacing my room after a shadow passed outside the window, he sat on the edge of my bed. "You're strong," he said quietly, "but it's okay to be scared. You don't have to carry this alone." His words felt like a lifeline, a reminder that even when someone violated your sense of safety, there were people who would stand with you. One weekend, Lena and I went to the local creek to sketch and relax. I tried to leave fear behind, to breathe, to feel normal again. But as we settled near the water, I noticed footprints in the sand that weren't ours, too big to be Lena's, too fresh to be from anyone else in the neighborhood. My pulse quickened. "We should go," I whispered. Lena didn't argue. We left, silent, but I knew that the memory of Sean would follow me for a long time. Junior year brought more independence, but also new anxieties. I joined the school newspaper and started helping organize art shows at the library, slowly pushing back against the fear that Sean's actions had instilled. I also began having conversations with a counselor about boundaries, consent, and recognizing red flags. Talking about it out loud made the fear smaller, more manageable. One Friday, while working on an exhibit in the library, I overheard a conversation about Sean. Someone mentioned he'd been transferred to a school far away, his parents moving again. Relief washed over me. He would no longer haunt the familiar streets or appear in the shadows of my favorite spots. I realized for the first time that my vigilance could finally relax. but the experience left lasting lessons. I noticed myself being cautious in new relationships, measuring trust more carefully than before. I listened to my instincts, spoke up when boundaries were crossed, and learned that fear didn't make me weak. It made me aware, resilient. Lena stayed my anchor, a reminder that support from the right people could counter even the darkest experiences. Even the mundane moments felt different. I appreciated small victories, the quiet sketching in the park, a late-night phone call with Lena, the laughter echoing through our bedrooms. Each moment of normalcy became a reclaiming of power, a reminder that life didn't stop because someone else's obsession had tried to control it. By the end of the year, I felt a cautious sense of peace. Sean was gone, and the worst of the fear had passed, but the summer of 2018 had permanently changed me. It taught me the fragility of trust, the importance of clear boundaries, and the necessity of leaning on those who truly cared for me. By senior year, I had grown cautious but resilient. I still walked the halls with a watchful eye, but the anxiety that had once consumed me had begun to fade. I joined more clubs, made new friends, and let myself laugh again without glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. Life was slowly regaining its rhythm, and I realized that surviving Sean's obsession had strengthened me in ways I hadn't expected. One afternoon, I was sitting on the library steps, sketchbook open on my lap, when a freshman approached me. "Hey, can you help me with this drawing?" she asked nervously. She reminded me of myself at that age, eager, a little unsure, trusting too easily. I smiled and nodded, feeling a strange sense of pride. I could guide her, teach her what I had learned about boundaries, about trusting instincts, and about standing up for herself. That summer, I attended the community art show with Lena. As we walked past the displays of vibrant paintings and sculptures, I caught my reflection in the glass and saw someone who had endured something frightening and come out stronger. The fear I had carried like a shadow was no longer in control of my life. I had learned to reclaim my time, my space, and my peace. I still remembered Sean's eyes, the intensity, the obsession, but instead of fear, I felt clarity. I understood that people like him could try to manipulate, intimidate, and control, but they could not define who I was or dictate the course of my life. My trust was precious, and I would give it only to those who proved themselves trustworthy. I had my boundaries, my support system, and my voice, and I knew how to use all three. As Lena and I walked home that evening, the air cool against our skin, she nudged me and said, "You've changed, you know? Stronger, I mean." I laughed, a genuine laugh that wasn't weighed down by worry. I had to, I admitted. Summer taught me a lot about who I am, and who I'm not letting in my life. We paused by the corner, and I looked at the familiar street that had once felt like a trap. Now it felt like a canvas waiting for the next sketch, a space for possibilities instead of fear. I realized that experiences like that summer could leave scars, yes, but they also carried lessons. Every nervous glance, every heartbeat that raced with anxiety, every moment I chose to stand firm instead of hiding, they shaped who I had become. I had survived because I listened to my instincts, leaned on those I trusted, and refused to allow someone else's obsession to control my life. Even years later, I would remember that summer as the one that changed everything, not because of the fear, but because it taught me the value of vigilance, self-respect, and courage. Life will sometimes bring people into our world who test our boundaries and attempt to control or manipulate us. It is not weakness to feel fear. It is wisdom to recognize it, listen to it, and act. True strength lies in trusting your instincts, seeking support from those who care for you, and standing firm in your right to safety and autonomy. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to reclaim your life despite it. Moving to Hawthorne Valley felt like stepping into a postcard. The streets were narrow, lined with maples that were just starting to blush amber with early fall, and the air carried a crispness I hadn't felt in the city for years. I'd spent months dreaming of this quiet life, A small townhouse, a few acres of green behind it, and space to work without the constant hum of traffic or the pressure of neighbors peering into my windows. My work as a freelance illustrator allowed it. My clients didn't care where I lived as long as deadlines were met, and I was craving the kind of solitude that let my mind breathe. Unpacking boxes in the living room, I tried to make the townhouse feel like mine. Sketchbooks lined the shelves, art supplies filled the desk drawers, and a small couch anchored the living space. I paused at the window, noticing movement next door. A man, unloading groceries, bent over a bag, and then looked up. Something about his face tugged at the corners of my memory. My breath caught. That's Artie. Artie, my childhood friend. The one I had spent countless summer afternoons riding bikes through the neighborhood, trading comic books and secrets and building a treehouse that we swore would last forever. His family had moved across the country when we were 12, leaving me with memories of laughter and video game marathons and the hollow feeling of sudden absence. I hadn't seen him in nearly 6 years, and now, by some twist of fate, he was my neighbor. I debated for hours whether I should just knock and say hello. My stomach buzzed with anticipation and nerves, like meeting a long-lost sibling I hadn't realized I'd missed. The next morning, I told myself it was now or never. I knocked on his door, and when he opened, the surprise in his eyes mirrored mine. "Wow, I can't believe it. You actually moved here? Crazy," he said, voice warm. We hugged awkwardly, laughing nervously. For a few moments, it felt like nothing had changed. We reminisced about old times over coffee, traded stories about the years we'd missed, and laughed at the absurdity of life taking us back to the same street. That evening, I invited him over for drinks, thinking it would be a fun way to reconnect. But when he arrived, it wasn't just him. 2 others followed closely behind. Scott, tall and silent with eyes that seemed to measure everything and everyone. And Jane, whose bright smile felt almost too practiced, too intentional. They lingered near my kitchen, commenting on my apartment, my furniture, even my sketchbooks. Artie noticed my unease but waved it off. "They're just curious, don't worry," he joked, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. At first I laughed it off, trying to keep things casual. But as the night progressed, the questions became more pointed. Jane asked about my daily routines, my work schedule, and even my security system. Scott studied every movement I made, eyes lingering too long on doors and windows. I laughed nervously, making small talk, but the sinking feeling in my stomach refused to fade. Something was off. Something I didn't want to name yet. That night, after Artie and his friends left, I double-checked the locks and went to bed with a knot in my stomach I couldn't shake. Sleep didn't come easily, each creak of the house setting my nerves on edge. When I finally drifted, it was short-lived. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a notification from my security camera app. My heart nearly stopped. 3 masked figures were lingering at my doorstep. One of them, Artie, was tugging at the door handle. My hands shook as I fumbled for the phone, calling 911. My voice trembled, the words stumbling over each other as adrenaline surged through me. By the time the police arrived, the figures had vanished into the night. I stayed inside, locked doors double-checked, windows secured. My townhouse, once a haven, now felt like a trap. In the days that followed, I couldn't reconcile the boy I'd grown up with, the one who had shared comics, summer ice cream, and treehouse secrets, with the man who had tried to break into my home. The betrayal cut deep. Even the familiarity of his face now sparked unease rather than comfort. The police confirmed my fears. Artie, Scott, and Jane were connected to a series of home invasions in the area. The sense of violation settled in slowly but firmly. I couldn't trust the memories of my childhood friendship to outweigh the reality of his dangerous choices. For weeks, I couldn't sleep properly. Every knock, every rustle outside triggered panic. I called Lena, my best friend from childhood, who lived hundreds of miles away almost daily. She reminded me to breathe, to be cautious, but not let fear completely control my life. Slowly, I began installing extra security measures, Cameras covering every angle, double locks, reinforced doors. I adjusted my routines, leaving the house only when necessary, always aware that the person I had trusted most had shown me the darkness he could harbor. Even familiar spaces felt tainted. Walking to the mailbox, opening the garage, even making coffee in the morning, all activities carried the subtle weight of paranoia. I had learned an unsettling truth. Familiarity does not guarantee safety. Sometimes people you think you know, the ones you've shared laughter and memories with, can become a source of fear. The police filed their report and left me with vague assurances that they would keep an eye out. It didn't feel like much. The silence after they drove off was deafening. I stood in my living room, lights off, curtains drawn, replaying the image of Artie tugging at my door handle. His face under that mask haunted me. I kept asking myself why. Why would he do that? Was it about money, or was it some sick game? The next morning I walked outside with a knot in my chest. The air smelled of rain, damp leaves littering the sidewalk. But the peaceful small-town charm felt counterfeit now. Artie's house stood just yards away, its curtains drawn tight. I wondered if he was inside watching me, laughing at my fear. I called Lena on the way back in. Her voice steadied me. "You need to remember this isn't your fault," she said firmly. "Don't try to make sense of it. Some people just change, and not for the better." But it was hard to accept. I spent hours scrolling through my old photo albums, finding snapshots of me and Artie as kids, us in our treehouse, smiling with grass-stained knees, us at his 10th birthday, faces smeared with frosting. How could that boy, the one who once cried when his dog ran away, become someone who tried to terrorize me? Days stretched into weeks. My work slowed, every sketch interrupted by the compulsion to check the cameras or make sure the door was locked. The few times I left the house, I caught myself scanning every face, wondering if Scott or Jane lurked nearby. At the grocery store, I even thought I saw Artie standing near the parking lot entrance, though when I blinked, he was gone. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. My stomach dropped. Through the peephole, I saw Artie. No mask this time, just him, standing casually with his hands in his pockets. I froze. After a few seconds, he leaned close to the door and whispered, "Me? After everything?" "You really called the cops on," I didn't answer. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might give me away. He chuckled softly, a chilling sound, and walked away like nothing had happened. I reported it to the police again, but they shrugged. Without video or proof, there wasn't much they could do. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch with a baseball bat across my lap, staring at the door. Every shadow seemed alive. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an intruder sneaking inside. I realized then that safety was more than locks or cameras. Safety was the absence of fear, and fear was all I had left. By late October, Hawthorne Valley had lost its charm entirely. The leaves were nearly gone from the trees, leaving bare branches clawing at the sky. My once ideal townhouse now felt like a bunker. The weight of betrayal pressed on me constantly. I kept asking myself if I had missed warning signs in Artie's behavior. Had he always been capable of this even as a child? Or had life twisted him into someone unrecognizable? I poured my anxiety into work, sketching darker pieces than I ever had before. My illustrations carried shadows and distorted faces, windows with figures lurking behind them, doors cracked open. My clients praised the intensity, unaware that the inspiration came from real fear. One cold evening, Lena called me on video chat. She could see the strain on my face, the dark circles under my eyes. "You can't live like this forever," she said. "Either you move again, or you stand your ground. But you can't keep waiting for him to show up." "I don't want to run," I admitted, voice cracking. "If I move every time something happens, then fear wins. But I also don't feel safe here. I don't feel safe anywhere." She thought for a moment before answering. "Then maybe the lesson isn't about running or fighting. Maybe it's about knowing who deserves to be in your life. Artie doesn't. Not anymore. Don't give him that power. Her words stuck with me. For the first time in weeks, I realized that my battle wasn't just with Artie. It was with the memory of who I thought he was. I had to stop clinging to the boy I remembered and face the man he had become. A few days later, police arrested Scott and Jane for attempting another break-in across town. Their mugshots were splashed across the local news. Artie wasn't mentioned, but I knew he was involved. Seeing their faces on the screen made something shift inside me. These weren't mysterious shadows anymore, they were criminals. Flawed, human, and caught. That night I slept for 6 uninterrupted hours for the first time in months. Not because the danger was gone, but because I finally understood something vital. The person I had once trusted was gone. Artie wasn't my friend anymore, and holding on to that illusion only gave him more power over me. When I woke up the next morning, I opened the curtains wide and let the sunlight flood in. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was done hiding. Winter came early to Hawthorne Valley. Frost painted the rooftops in the mornings, and the air carried the sharp scent of wood smoke from chimneys. The town looked quiet, almost idyllic again, but I no longer viewed it with the same innocence I had when I first moved in. Every streetlight, every alley, carried a different weight now. By December, life had taken on a rhythm again. I worked on projects during the day, bundled up for short walks, and spoke with Lena every evening. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it no longer ruled me. Instead, it lingered at the edges, a reminder rather than a master. Then one evening, just after 7, I heard footsteps outside. I froze, staring at the door, waiting. A soft knock followed. Against my better judgment, I peered through the peephole. It was Artie again. He wasn't masked this time, wasn't smirking like before. He just stood there, shivering slightly, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Open up," he said quietly. "I just want to talk." Every muscle in my body screamed to stay silent, but something inside me, curiosity, maybe stubbornness, kept me frozen in place, listening. "I didn't mean for things to go like this," he continued, glancing over his shoulder. "It wasn't supposed to get that serious. Scott and Jane, they pushed me into things, but you were supposed to understand me. We were friends, don't you get that?" My chest tightened. For a brief moment I saw flashes of the boy I had known, the kid who had once sworn we'd never let life pull us apart. But the man outside my door wasn't that boy anymore. He was dangerous, manipulative, and desperate. I whispered to myself, "Don't answer." He knocked again, harder this time. Me that much. "You owe me at least a word. After all these years, you owe." I stepped back from the door. My silence was the only answer I had left. After a long pause, he cursed under his breath and stormed off into the night. That was the last time I saw him in person. A week later, word spread through town that he'd been arrested with Scott and Jane, this time caught red-handed attempting to break into another home. Seeing his mugshot online was surreal. The familiar face, framed by harsh lighting and a blank wall, felt like the final confirmation that the Artie I had known was gone. The news should have made me feel vindicated, maybe even triumphant. But mostly, I felt tired. Tired of the memories, tired of the fear, tired of the confusion. It was like grieving someone who was still alive. When the first heavy snow fell in January, I stood at my window and watched it cover the street, softening everything. For the first time since moving to Hawthorne Valley, I allowed myself to exhale fully. Life wasn't safe in the way I had imagined it would be, but it was real, and I could live with that. Trust is a fragile thing. It can be built over years but shattered in a single night. What I learned from Artie wasn't just about betrayal or fear. It was about the importance of listening to my instincts and accepting when people show you who they truly are. Familiarity is not the same as safety, and sometimes the hardest lesson is letting go of the past version of someone you once loved or trusted. In the end, the neighbor I thought I knew wasn't really my neighbor anymore. He was a stranger, wearing the face of my childhood friend, and the only way forward was to stop clinging to what once was and protect the life I was building now. When I think back to the fall of 2021, I remember it as the season I tried to reinvent myself. The breakup had gutted me more than I liked to admit, and walking away from my high-stakes corporate job felt like jumping into the unknown. The long nights of working under fluorescent lights, answering to people who barely remembered my name, had left me burned out and brittle. Moving to Bayshore, Maine, was supposed to be my quiet rebellion, a chance to breathe again, to discover if I could build a life defined by something more than deadlines and glass office towers. Bayshore wasn't big. It smelled of salt water, old wood, and coffee grounds. On weekends, locals gathered at the pier, and in the evenings, you could hear the gulls echo across the harbor. My apartment on Seaview Avenue was modest, with cracked linoleum in the kitchen and a view of the ocean if you leaned just right out of the second-story window. But it was mine, and that made it feel safe. Or at least it did at first. One of my first weekends in town, I found myself wandering without a plan, jacket zipped against the October wind, until I stopped in front of a little shop squeezed between a cafe and a laundromat. The inked page, the sign read in cheerful lettering. The bell jingled when I pushed the door open, and the air inside hit me with something I hadn't felt in years. Comfort. It smelled like my childhood. Paper, ink, and dust all blended into one. I drifted through the aisles, fingertips grazing over the spines of comic books I hadn't thought about since middle school. That was when I noticed him. A man leaned against one of the shelves near the back, thin frame, dark glasses, hair falling just past his ears. He gave me a crooked smile when our eyes met. "Good taste," he said, nodding at the stack of vintage Spider-Man issues I was holding. I smiled back politely. "I grew up with these. They're kind of familiar." "Same here. I'm Pete." He extended a hand and his grip was surprisingly firm. We started talking. It began with comics, story arcs we loved, the artwork we admired, but drifted quickly into video games and old Saturday morning cartoons. He had this way of laughing too loud, but it made the conversation flow easily. For the first time since moving, I didn't feel like a stranger in a strange place. That afternoon turned into a pattern. Over the next few weeks, Pete and I found ourselves running into each other more often at the inked page. Sometimes he'd join me for coffee after. Other times we'd linger in the store until closing, talking about retro games or the way modern superhero movies butchered the classics. He was attentive, always leaning in when I spoke, echoing my thoughts back to me like he understood better than anyone. At first, it felt harmless. After the loneliness of starting over, it felt good to have someone who shared my interests and seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. But even in those early days, I remember a strange flicker of unease, like watching a shadow move across a room you thought was empty. I ignored it. After all, hadn't I come here to begin again? Didn't I deserve to trust that the world might give me a friend instead of another disappointment? Back then, I still believed coincidence could explain everything. The weeks rolled into November and my friendship with Pete deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We developed rituals. Wednesday afternoons at the comic store, Saturday evenings at my apartment with takeout cartons and an old console hooked up to my TV. He remembered every detail I mentioned, my favorite band, the way I liked my coffee, even the story of how I once saved my allowance for 3 months just to buy a rare X-Men issue. It was flattering, almost intoxicating to be listened to so closely. But soon little cracks appeared. One Friday, I ducked into the inked page on a whim, hoping to pick up a new release. I hadn't told Pete I was going. Yet when I stepped inside, there he was, standing near the counter as if he'd been waiting. He grinned wide when he saw me. "Funny running into you," he said, though his eyes gleamed with something sharper. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, what are the odds?" The coincidences kept piling up. He began mirroring me in unsettling ways. I'd make an offhand comment about liking plaid shirts, and a week later, he'd show up wearing one. I mentioned how I sometimes said "no worries" instead of "it's okay," and soon it slipped into his speech too, like he'd borrowed the phrase. It was subtle at first, just enough to brush off. But the more it happened, the more I felt that creeping discomfort again. He wasn't just listening. He was studying, absorbing, becoming. Then came the afternoon I'll never forget. I had left work early, hoping for a few hours to sketch before the evening. When I pushed open my apartment door, the first thing I noticed was the faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine. My chest tightened as I set my bag down and walked toward the living room. There, standing by my desk with his hands rifling through a stack of papers, was Pete. He turned sharply when he saw me. "Hey!" His smile was forced, too wide. "I thought I'd surprise you. I was just looking for, I don't know, a comic you might have left out. Wanted to bring it back to you as a gift." My throat went dry. "How did you even get in here?" He shrugged, still grinning. "You left the door unlocked." I hadn't. I told him to leave, my voice firmer than I thought it could be. His smile flickered, but he obeyed, moving past me with a strange calm. As the door clicked shut behind him, my heart pounded in my ears. I stood frozen in my own apartment, the air suddenly heavy and wrong. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps. Every shadow outside my window felt like it was watching me. I replayed his words over and over, the casual shrug, the way he pretended it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Something had shifted. The friendship I thought I had built was showing its true shape. And it was darker than I ever imagined. The day after finding Pete in my apartment, I tried to convince myself it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe he truly thought he was doing something kind. Maybe I'd imagined the unease in his eyes. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I avoided the inked page for a while, telling myself it was temporary, just until things cooled off. Yet even when I stayed away, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Walking home from the grocery store one evening, I caught sight of someone across the street, a tall, thin figure in a leather jacket. He turned quickly down another block, but I knew it was him. The next time Pete appeared was outside my building. I was locking up my bike when he strolled up like nothing had happened. "You've been scarce lately," he said, grinning. "Yeah," I muttered, fiddling with the lock. "Been busy with work." He tilted his head. "Pretty well by now." "You should have told me. I would have helped. I mean, I know your schedule." That sentence chilled me. I forced a polite smile, mumbled an excuse, and went upstairs. From the window, I watched him linger on the sidewalk for a few minutes before walking away. The turning point came one afternoon in late October. I returned home earlier than usual, sunlight slanting low across the street. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I noticed the door frame splintered near the lock. My stomach dropped. I pushed the door open and stepped inside cautiously. The living room looked intact, but when I went to my desk, the box that had held my most prized comics, rare originals I'd collected since childhood, was gone. My hands shook as I checked the rest of the apartment. A drawer with personal documents had been rifled through, papers left askew. A chill ran through me. It wasn't just about comics. Whoever had been here wanted more. That evening I sat at the police station, recounting everything. The officer, a woman with kind eyes, listened patiently, jotting notes. When I mentioned Pete, her pen paused. "Pete Carlson?" she asked, flipping through a file. I nodded slowly. She sighed. "We've had reports about him before. Nothing that stuck. Harassment claims, loitering, suspicious behavior. But nothing we could pin down." The words sent a cold rush through me. I wasn't the first. The officer promised they'd investigate, but as I walked home under the orange streetlights, I felt exposed, like the whole town was watching. That night I double-locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, and sat awake until dawn, listening for sounds that never came. Sleep didn't feel safe anymore. Neither did daylight. The weeks that followed blurred into one long stretch of tension. Every day felt like waiting for something to break. I installed new locks, bought a cheap security camera, and kept my curtains drawn. Still, I couldn't relax. Pete texted me constantly, messages ranging from casual jokes to unnerving declarations. "You can't just cut people out like that. I know you miss hanging out." We were meant to understand each other. I didn't respond, but silence only seemed to fuel him. One night around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a picture message. My heart pounded as I opened it. The photo showed the view of my apartment building taken from across the street. The caption read, "Still awake?" My stomach flipped. I called the police immediately. They arrived within 20 minutes, lights flashing outside my window. But of course, Pete was gone. The officer who'd taken my earlier report grew sharper in her questions. "You need to consider a restraining order," she said firmly. "This isn't just about stolen property anymore." Filing the paperwork was surreal. The courthouse smelled of disinfectant and old wood, and the clerk barely looked at me as I described the harassment. A part of me still clung to disbelief. This was Pete, the guy who'd laughed with me over pizza boxes, who'd remembered every story I told. How had it come to this? The restraining order went through within a week, and for a short while things seemed calmer. I walked to the harbor again, let the ocean air clear my head. I even returned to the inked page, though I felt eyes on me the whole time. But calm never lasted. One evening, I returned home to find a plain envelope slipped under my door. Inside were photocopies of documents, my bank statements, my ID, even a draft of an illustration contract I'd left on my desk weeks earlier. A note scrawled across the to read, "You shouldn't have locked me out." I collapsed onto the couch, trembling. He hadn't just wanted comics. He wanted access to me, to my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left I could keep private. That night, I packed a small bag and drove to a motel on the edge of town. I couldn't stay in my apartment, not knowing he'd been inside, not knowing what else he might try. From the motel bed, staring at the stained ceiling tiles, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. Pete wasn't a friend, not even a misguided one. He was a predator, and I had been too willing to let him close. The betrayal cut deep, but the fear went deeper still. The motel walls felt thin, every sound amplified through the plaster. I could hear a couple arguing in the next room, footsteps overhead, cars passing on the highway outside. Sleep came, in short bursts broken by the thought of Pete standing at my door, slipping envelopes into my apartment, watching from across the street. The police followed up after I called from the motel, and an officer met me the next morning. He told me they had linked Pete to other reports in the area, unauthorized entries, missing items, and threatening behavior. He wasn't just some awkward comic enthusiast who had crossed a line. He had a pattern. That knowledge gave me a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that it wasn't all in my head. Dread because it meant he was practiced at this, and people like me had been targets before. For a week, I lived out of that motel room, working on my illustration jobs by day and scanning parking lots by night. I barely spoke to anyone except Lena, who called constantly from Boston. Her voice was the tether keeping me from unraveling. "You can't let him take your home from you," she told me firmly one night. "You'll get stronger out of this, I know it." "He doesn't get to do," her conviction steadied me. The breakthrough came when the police called to tell me Pete had been arrested. They'd caught him attempting to break into another apartment across town. When they searched his belongings, they found my comics, my photocopied documents, and even a notebook filled with unsettling notes about me, where I shopped, when I left for work, the people I spoke to. Reading the list later in the police report made my skin crawl. He had been documenting me, as if I were a character in one of the comics we once bonded over. The arrest didn't erase the fear immediately, but it gave me space to breathe. I moved back into my apartment slowly, one night at a time, each evening a test of courage. I replaced every lock, added cameras at both entrances, and let friends crash on my couch until I felt steady again. There were nights when I'd wake up convinced I heard footsteps outside, heart hammering in my throat, only to find nothing but the hum of the streetlights. I carried the weight of it for months, the knowledge that someone I trusted had mapped out my life with such precision. Eventually, I returned to the inked page, though it took all my courage. The owner, who had heard about what happened, offered me a quiet nod and a cup of coffee on the house. It was a small gesture, but it reminded me that not everyone hides sharp edges behind familiar smiles. Life didn't return to what it was before Pete. It couldn't. But slowly, I rebuilt a version of it I could live with. I kept drawing, filling sketchbooks late into the night. I walked to the harbor, letting the sound of waves settle my mind. I allowed myself to trust again, though with more caution, more questions, more patience. The shadow of betrayal lingered, but so did the lesson it carved into me. Trust can be dangerous, and sometimes the people who look like salvation carry the sharpest knives. What I learned through Pete was not just about fear or betrayal, but about boundaries. Loneliness can make us open doors too quickly, and shared interest can trick us into believing we've found safe ground. But trust must be earned, not granted at the first spark of connection. It isn't paranoia to protect your space, it's survival. Pay attention to the signs, the small slips in behavior, the moments that tighten your chest. Believe them, because not every smile masks kindness, and not every friend from the comic store means you well. Sometimes the truest strength is knowing when to lock the door and walk away. Moving into Graymore felt like stepping into another world. After years of deadlines, fluorescent office lights, and a calendar that left no space to breathe, I craved stillness. Graymore had that in spades. It was a foggy harbor town where boats clinked against the docks and locals lingered in diners past midnight over endless coffee. I thought the quiet would heal me, that it would press pause on the anxious buzz of my life. The apartment on 82 Harbor Street wasn't perfect, but it charmed me in its own way. The wood floors creaked with every step, the radiators hissed and groaned, and the hall smelled faintly of salt air and old carpet. My cat, Milo, claimed the windowsills as his thrones, often staring out at the fog like he was studying a mystery I couldn't see. For me, the apartment was supposed to be a refuge. I hung my sketches on the walls, stacked books in uneven piles, and left my guitar propped against the couch. It was small, yes, but it felt mine. At first, the strange details barely registered. A book out of place here, a mug where I didn't remember leaving it. I chalked it up to exhaustion. I was working long hours on freelance illustration projects, often losing track of time as I drew deep into the night. It wasn't until the footsteps started that I felt the first bite of unease. It was late, around 11 when I first heard them. A steady rhythm above me, pacing. The landlord had been clear. The third floor was vacant, sealed up until renovations next spring. Still, the sound went on for minutes, then stopped. Milo perked his ears toward the ceiling, confirming I wasn't imagining it. I told myself it must be pipes, old wood shifting, or maybe a neighbor's sound bouncing strangely. But each night after, the footsteps returned, louder, like someone walking slowly across the room, pausing, then starting again. I tried to shake it off. "It's an old building," I muttered to Milo one night. But the cat didn't seem convinced. He stared at the ceiling with a sharpness that made my stomach twist. The sense of being observed only grew. Returning home from the grocery store, I'd find the door chain slightly off as if someone had tested it. Lights I swore I'd turned off burned dimly when I walked in. Then came the notes, slipped under my door, handwritten, nothing dramatic, just eerie in their intimacy. "You leave your light on too late. Milo doesn't like tuna, does he?" My chest tightened when I read them. I hadn't told anyone about Milo's picky eating, not even Clara, my best friend since childhood. How would someone know unless they had been watching me closely? The idea that someone might be in the apartment above, the one that was supposed to be vacant, settled into my bones like ice. Each creak, each shadow outside my window pressed against me like a weight. What had started as a fresh start in Graymore was slowly unraveling into something darker, something that left me questioning if I was truly alone in my own home. By December, the atmosphere in the building had shifted for me entirely. The cozy imperfections of the place now felt sinister. Every flickering hallway light seemed timed to unsettle me. Every groan of the radiators sounded like a whisper through the walls. I started locking my door with 2 deadbolts, then checking them 3 times before bed. It was around then that I met Shauna. She lived 2 doors down on the same floor, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't quite touch them. She introduced herself casually one evening while I was hauling groceries up the stairs. "You're the new tenant, right? Apartment 2B?" she asked, leaning against the railing like she'd been waiting. Her friendliness felt forced, but I tried not to judge. Small towns had their quirks, and maybe she was just curious. But the questions came quickly. My work schedule, whether I lived alone, if anyone visited me often. She even asked about Milo, crouching down to scratch him while remarking, "You're usually home by 7, right? Except last Thursday when you came back closer to 9. The casual precision of her observation set alarm bells ringing in my head. I laughed weakly and changed the subject, but my mind replayed her words long after I closed my apartment door. How much had she noticed about me? And why was she paying that much attention? That night, the footsteps returned, louder this time, and accompanied by something else. A dragging sound, like furniture being shifted. I sat frozen on the couch, Milo pressed against my leg, his tail puffed up. My rational brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe the landlord had rented the space without telling me. Maybe workers were preparing the floor early. But when I called the landlord the next morning, he sounded almost annoyed. "There's no one up there, hasn't been for months. Probably just the pipes." But pipes didn't slip notes under my door. The notes increased. Some were banal. "You should water your plants more." Others grew more pointed. "You look tired when you come back late." I started saving them in a shoebox, photographing each one with my phone, building a record. Clara urged me to go to the police, but I hesitated. What would I even tell them? That creaky floors and vague notes had me paranoid. One night, at 2:30 in the morning, I was jolted awake by a sharp knocking on my bedroom window. Milo hissed, leaping off the bed, fur standing on end. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated nothing but fog and an empty street. But the sound had been real, deliberate, not some branch scraping glass. I barely slept after that. The feeling that someone was watching me tightened around my chest like a rope. Every time I left the apartment, I felt eyes on me. And every time I came back, I half expected to find Milo gone, or my belongings rearranged. Graymore had promised me quiet. Instead, it was giving me shadows, questions, and the creeping certainty that I wasn't living alone at all. By the time the holidays rolled around, I was on edge. I stopped inviting anyone over because I didn't want them to feel the unease I lived with daily. Even Clara, who begged to visit, got excuses about work deadlines. Truthfully, I was embarrassed. How could I explain that I was terrified of footsteps and scraps of paper? But inside my own skin, the fear was real, prickling like static electricity. I decided to take action in the only way that felt manageable. I bought a small set of motion cameras online and installed them discreetly inside my apartment. I pointed one toward the front door, one toward the living room, and another in the hallway outside. The tiny red recording lights comforted me a little, though I wasn't sure what I hoped to catch. For a week, things were quiet. No new notes, no footsteps overhead. I started to wonder if maybe I'd overreacted, if the paranoia had fed on itself until I convinced myself of a ghost story. Then on a Tuesday morning, I reviewed the hallway footage. My stomach turned cold. At 2:17 a.m., the camera caught Shauna walking slowly past my door, pausing and leaning down as though placing something. She looked right into the camera, eyes wide and unblinking before standing and walking away. I rushed to the door, checking the shoebox of notes. Sure enough, a new one had appeared. "You shouldn't keep your blinds open at night. Anyone could be watching." My hands shook as I sent the video to Clara. She called immediately, her voice fierce. "Just paranoia anymore. She's messing with you. You need to report this, tonight." This isn't I promised her I would. But when I dialed the non-emergency police line, I froze. What exactly was I reporting? A neighbor walking in a hallway where she lived, dropping cryptic notes? The officer on the line sounded unconvinced, telling me to log everything and call back if anything escalated. That word, escalated, echoed in my mind like a dare. The footsteps came back that night, heavier now and unmistakably deliberate. I sat on the couch in the dark, Milo pressed against me, listening as they moved from one side of the ceiling to the other. I whispered into the silence, "Who are you?" My voice cracked. The footsteps stopped. The next morning I checked my upstairs camera feed, the one I'd pointed out the window at the supposedly vacant top floor. At 3:04 a.m. the lens caught movement, a shadowy figure pulling back one of the third-floor curtains, just slightly, then letting it fall. That was when it hit me. Someone was living up there. Not a ghost, not my imagination. Someone. And Shauna knew about it. I couldn't shake the image of that curtain moving. It played over and over in my head as I tried to work, my sketches of characters and landscapes turning jittery with unease. Clara urged me to get out of the building for a while, maybe stay with her a few towns over, but stubbornness rooted me in place. This was my apartment. I wasn't going to be pushed out by whoever was haunting the floor above me. Still, I couldn't stay passive. That night, I decided to test a theory. I set a glass bottle on the top stair leading up to the third floor, just inside the stairwell door that was supposed to remain locked. If anyone came or went, the bottle would topple and shatter. Around midnight, I lay in bed wide awake, Milo curled at my feet. The sound came, a faint clink, then a crash. My heart pounded as I crept into the hallway, phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The bottle lay broken, glittering shards on the landing, and from the shadows above came the unmistakable sound of breathing. Slow, steady, patient. "Who's there?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. The breathing stopped. A door creaked shut overhead. I bolted back to my apartment and deadbolted the door, shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. My first call was Clara, who stayed on the line until I calmed down enough to make the second call, to the police. This time, they came. 2 officers swept through the building with flashlights, checking the supposedly vacant unit. They found signs of someone living there, a mattress on the floor, food wrappers, a backpack shoved in the corner, but no person. Whoever it was had slipped out before they arrived. When the officers asked if I had any idea who it could be, my mind went immediately to Shauna. Her strange questions, her late-night prowling, her eerie calm when she spoke about my schedule. It all pointed back to her. But I didn't say her name. Not yet. Fear kept my lips sealed. The police boarded the upstairs unit, warning me to stay cautious. But the next day, Shauna knocked on my door. Her smile was wide, her eyes bright. "You called the cops," she said softly, almost teasing. I swallowed hard, Milo hissing at her feet. "Someone was living up there. You knew." She tilted her head, like a teacher humoring a child. "Interesting enough to be here. And you are. So interesting. I just wanted to make sure you were." The way she said it sent a shiver straight through me, and in that moment I knew the nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building made my nerves snap taut. Every shadow felt alive. Milo paced restlessly, his tail puffed, sensing the tension that thickened the air. I sat on the couch with a baseball bat I'd borrowed from Clara years ago, my phone clutched in the other hand. The police had sealed the upstairs apartment, but I couldn't shake the image of Shauna standing in my doorway, smiling as though she knew more than anyone else in the world. Her words echoed over and over. So interesting. I wanted to believe it was just taunting, some cruel way to feed off my fear, but part of me couldn't help wondering, had she been living up there herself, or was she covering for someone else? 2 nights later, around 1:30 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. Louder, pacing, back and forth directly above me like a predator circling prey. I dialed Clara, whispering into the phone. It's happening again. I can hear them. They're back. Get out, she urged. Right now. Don't wait for the cops. Just grab Milo and leave. But stubbornness or maybe stupidity held me in place. I wanted proof. I wanted answers. With the phone in one hand and the bat in the other, I crept into the hallway. The stairwell door to the third floor, supposedly boarded shut, was cracked open. My chest seized as I pushed it wider. The boards were gone. My breath caught. I lifted the bat higher, stepping slowly up the stairs. At the top, the door to the vacant apartment hung ajar. I pushed it with the tip of the bat and it swung open, revealing the dim, sour smell of unwashed clothes and rotting food. A thin mattress lay on the floor, blankets scattered, and on the wall, scrawled in marker, was a sentence that froze the blood in my veins. You look most alive when you're afraid. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over Milo, who had followed me despite my attempts to keep him inside. My phone buzzed in my hand. Clara shouting through the line, "What's happening? Talk to me." But before I could answer, I heard it. A whisper, low and close, from the dark corner of the room. "You shouldn't have come up here." I didn't wait to see who it was. I grabbed Milo, bolted down the stairs, and slammed my apartment door shut, locking every bolt. I could still hear footsteps above, but I didn't stay to listen. This time I called 911 and demanded immediate help. The police came again, this time with more officers. They swept the building, dragging Shauna's friend, a gaunt man I'd never seen before, out of the third-floor unit. He looked hollow, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Shauna was arrested soon after when they discovered she had been letting him stay illegally and feeding him information about me. Watching them haul her away, her smile never fading, was the most unnerving sight of all. She looked directly at me and mouthed, "See you soon." I moved out within a week. Clara helped me pack while Milo stayed curled in his carrier, as if he too was ready to escape. The cozy apartment I once thought would be my refuge had become a cage of paranoia and dread. Even now, in a new place far from Greymoor, I double-check every lock, glance at every shadow, and listen for footsteps that may or may not be there. Because I learned something chilling in those months on Harbor Street. Sometimes the walls around you don't protect you. Sometimes they hide the very people who want to see you afraid. The ordeal taught me that vigilance isn't paranoia when warning signs are real. Danger doesn't always come crashing through the front door. It can slip quietly into your life, wearing the face of a friendly neighbor or hiding just a floor above. Trust must be earned carefully, and instincts should never be ignored. Fear may feel like weakness, but in truth, it's often the first and strongest signal that something is wrong. Listening to it can mean the difference between being a victim and finding the strength to survive. Looking back, the loft apartment above the bookstore seemed like the perfect place to rebuild my life. It was October 2018, a Portland autumn in full swing, the streets damp and glistening under streetlights, the air heavy with the scent of pine and coffee. The apartment itself was nothing grand, creaky wood floors, a slanted ceiling that leaked cold air, and a single skylight that rattled during storms. But it had character, and in that character, I saw a chance for a new beginning. I had just come out of a storm of personal chaos. My parents' divorce had fractured the stability of the family I thought would always be unshakable. My own relationships mirrored that instability, brief romances that ended in silence, friendships tested by distance or betrayal. To top it off, a thief had stolen my bike right outside the design studio where I was temping, leaving me dependent on buses and my own stubborn legs to navigate the city. Portland had its charm, but it wasn't gentle. Ethan, my best friend since high school, was the anchor through all of it. He had a calmness about him, the kind that steadied me when I began to doubt myself. We'd bonded over late-night painting sessions in his parents' garage, dreaming of being artists when everyone else around us seemed destined for safer careers. Now, in our 20s, we were still navigating the uncertainty of those dreams, holding each other up in the process. Ethan reminded me often, "You've got instincts. Trust them. They'll keep you safe." I used to laugh at that, thinking it sounded like something out of a movie. But as I'd later learn, his words were the truest compass I ever had. That Friday night, October 19th, the city seemed almost gentle. Rain had swept the sidewalks clean, and the usual rush of cars along Hawthorne Boulevard had quieted to a lull. Ethan and I were celebrating the completion of a mural project, a vibrant splash of color on the side of a local record shop. It hadn't paid much, but it gave me a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in months. We found ourselves at the Copper Lantern, a bar tucked between two antique shops. Inside, the lighting was soft, golden, and almost dreamlike, casting long shadows across wood-paneled walls. Ethan ordered his whiskey neat. I settled for cider, savoring the warmth it brought against the chill outside. We toasted to survival, to art, and to the stubborn resilience that kept us both from giving up on the city or ourselves. That's when I noticed her. She was seated at a corner table, her posture straight yet relaxed, sketchbook open in front of her. Auburn hair fell in loose waves, catching the light each time she tucked it behind her ear. She wasn't drawing anything grand, just tracing over the fibers of a napkin as though every detail mattered. Her eyes moved across the room like she was cataloging it, and for a moment they met mine. It wasn't a smile that passed between us, but something heavier, curiosity wrapped in caution. Ethan caught me staring and grinned. "She looks like the kind of trouble you'd actually enjoy." I laughed, brushing it off, but something inside me nudged. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe just curiosity, but I found myself walking over. Her name was Clara. Clara's voice was low, deliberate, with an ease that made me want to lean closer. She told me she was an interior designer, recently back from Chicago, where she had worked on boutique cafes and small art spaces. Her stories felt lived in, not rehearsed, though I noticed she often glanced toward the door like she was waiting for someone. "You're not from Portland, are you?" I asked, sipping my cider. "Born here, actually," she replied, twirling her pen between her fingers. "Thought I wanted something bigger. Turns out bigger isn't always better." But I left for a while. Ethan, never one to let me linger too long, wandered over and joined the conversation, teasing me about my mural work and overselling my talent in a way that made Clara laugh. I noticed, though, that whenever Ethan spoke, Clara's attention shifted quickly back to me, as though he were just background noise in the frame of a picture she was painting. The night carried on with that strange balance: laughter, drinks, and moments of silence that felt charged rather than awkward. Still, I couldn't shake the way she kept fiddling with her phone, locking and unlocking it, her thumb hovering over the screen like she was waiting for instructions. Around 12:15 a.m., Clara suggested we leave. Together. "I live nearby," she said casually. We could walk. Ethan shot me a look, half warning, half amused. I shrugged, telling myself there was nothing wrong with walking someone home. Besides, Ethan trailed a block behind us, hands in his pockets like a silent chaperone. Back at the loft, Clara's demeanor shifted almost immediately. She didn't sit. She moved around the space, her eyes sharp and searching, as if cataloging every corner of the room. When I offered her tea, she declined without hesitation, her gaze flicking to the door at the faint sound of footsteps outside. Then came the knock, a soft, deliberate tap that made my stomach sink. "I'll get it," Clara said, her tone suddenly stripped of the warmth she had shown at the bar. It was calm, rehearsed, the voice of someone who already knew what waited on the other side. When the door opened, two men stepped in. One tall and gaunt with a gun tucked under his jacket, the other shorter but broad, his voice sharp as he barked. Wallets, electronics, everything valuable. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She simply stepped aside. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur. My laptop, my cash, the few things of value I owned disappearing into their bags. I complied, every instinct screaming that resistance would only end worse. Ethan's words echoed in my mind. "Trust your instincts." And my instincts told me this woman had been playing me from the moment I saw her sketching at that corner table. When it was over, when the men had gone and the loft was silent again, I stared at Clara, my hands trembling. "Why?" I asked, the word small, pitiful in the heavy air. She didn't answer. She only gave me a faint, unreadable smile, then slipped out into the Portland drizzle, leaving me with nothing but questions and the chill of betrayal. For a long time after the door shut, I just sat there, frozen, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than the rain outside. Milo, the bookstore owner's old cat, who occasionally wandered into my loft, had slipped in earlier that evening and now crouched under the couch, his wide eyes following me as if he understood something had shattered. My hands shook as I picked up my phone, struggling to dial Ethan. He didn't answer the first time. My mind conjured the worst. What if they had followed him too? What if this wasn't just about me? I tried again, and relief flooded when he picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert. "Where are you?" I demanded, my words spilling out in a rush. "I'm outside. I saw them leave your building." His voice was clipped, angry, was off when you stopped texting back. I thought something. Minutes later, he was at my door, and when I opened it, the sight of him standing there, damp from the rain, fists clenched, broke the thin dam I'd been holding. My chest heaved with sobs I didn't expect, the kind that come from realizing just how close you've been to something far worse than theft. We called the police together, filing the report with voices that wavered between anger and disbelief. The officers asked for descriptions, for details, for anything that could lead them to Clara or the men she'd walked in with. I gave them everything I could, the auburn hair, the nervous glances at the bar, the way she seemed to know the knock was coming before it even happened. But even as I spoke, I felt the futility. Clara had orchestrated it too carefully. This wasn't a random act of desperation. It was planned, rehearsed. She had studied me, maybe even followed me before that night. The realization sent a shiver up my spine. Ethan stayed over that night. Neither of us slept much. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the skylight felt like an intrusion. I kept replaying the moments in my head. The smile she gave me when I first walked over to her table, the way she leaned into my stories, the false warmth. It wasn't just the theft, it was the deliberate dismantling of trust. The following days were a blur of paperwork, insurance claims, and tense conversations with my landlord, who didn't like the idea of strangers with guns storming into his building. I couldn't blame him. I no longer felt like I lived in my loft. I felt like I was squatting in a crime scene. It was Ethan who found the first clue. A week later, while grabbing coffee at a cafe down the street, he noticed the security camera angled toward the corner table by the window. "That's where Clara was sitting," he told me, urging me to ask the manager if footage could be reviewed. The cafe owner, sympathetic after hearing my story, allowed us a look. And there she was. Clara, sitting alone, but not entirely. The footage showed her looking up every few minutes, eyes shifting toward the street. Then, almost too casually, one of the men who later stormed my apartment walked past the window. She tapped her phone immediately afterward. It confirmed what my gut already knew. I hadn't just been unlucky. I'd been targeted. The footage went to the police, but as weeks stretched on, no arrests were made. Clara disappeared into the city like mist in the morning. What lingered was the unease. Her absence somehow louder than her presence had been. By November, Portland was drowning in rain. The loft's skylight rattled constantly, keeping me awake most nights. I'd installed new locks, even a small camera above the door, but security measures didn't erase the memory of betrayal. I became hyper-aware of strangers. On buses, I caught myself staring at reflections in the window, wondering if someone was watching me. At work, I jumped when co-workers entered the room too quietly. The world had turned into a theater of shadows, every figure a possible threat. Ethan noticed, of course. Coffee while I sat sketching aimlessly. "You can't live like this," he said one evening, handing me a mug of, "I know it's hard, but you can't let her win twice." "I can't even walk past the copper lantern without feeling sick," I admitted. "Corner of this city holds her fingerprints." "It's like every," he sighed, settling into the chair across from me. "It's about outlasting." Then maybe it's not about forgetting. Maybe it sounded cliché, but something in his tone stuck with me. Clara might have taken my belongings, my sense of security, but she didn't have to take the rest of my life. Still, letting go was harder than I thought. Weeks later, while running errands, I caught a glimpse of someone who looked just like her. Same auburn hair, same sharp gait. My stomach lurched, my pulse spiked. I followed her instinctively for half a block before realizing it wasn't her. The shame of that paranoia settled heavy on me. Clara had left, but she hadn't. She lingered in my reflexes, in my suspicion, in my loss of ease. Ethan became my lifeline during that stretch, staying longer than either of us had planned. He didn't say it outright, but I think he feared leaving me alone in the loft would undo whatever progress I was clawing toward. We repainted one wall a bright teal, a silly attempt to reclaim the space. I hung new sketches, forced color back into the room where the memory of that night still lingered like smoke. By December, the investigation had gone cold. The police had other priorities, and Clara was just one face among thousands in Portland. There were no fingerprints, no solid leads beyond the footage of her in the cafe. But then came a small discovery that froze me all over again. One night, Ethan and I were cleaning out old boxes in the loft's storage nook. Among my scattered papers, we found a folded piece of lined notebook paper tucked between sketch pads I hadn't touched since before the robbery. In neat handwriting were the words, "You're more predictable than you think." I dropped the paper as though it burned me. Ethan picked it up, scanning it twice before meeting my eyes. "This wasn't here before?" I shook my head, my mouth dry. It meant only one thing. Clara hadn't just orchestrated the break-in. At some point before that night, she had already been inside my apartment. Finding that note cracked something in me. Up until then, I had treated the robbery as an ugly, violent fluke. A night where bad luck collided with misplaced trust. But the paper, tucked so deliberately into my belongings, proved something worse. I hadn't just been targeted, I'd been studied. For days, I couldn't walk into the loft without scanning every corner, every shadow, like she might be there, crouched in some hidden pocket of space. I tore through the apartment in a frenzy, searching for cameras, for more notes, for anything that suggested she had left a deeper mark than I already knew. Ethan tried to calm me, but he looked just as shaken. That single sheet of notebook paper had turned the loft into something else entirely. Not a home, but evidence. We turned it over to the police, but their response was the same tired refrain. Without fingerprints, without direct surveillance footage of her entering, there wasn't much they could do. They logged it, filed it, promised to keep me updated. Weeks later, the case was still cold. Meanwhile, I couldn't keep pretending life was normal. At the design studio, my coworkers noticed how distracted I'd become. My sketches grew darker, harsher, heavy strokes replacing the playful colors I once loved. Nights were worse. I'd bolt awake at every creak, convinced I heard someone at the door. Milo, the bookstore cat, became my unofficial emotional support, curling at my feet as if he sensed I needed grounding. Ethan, patient as ever, finally sat me down one rainy evening. "Look," he said gently. "This loft was supposed to be temporary. Maybe it's time we moved on. New walls, new streets. Start somewhere Clara hasn't touched." I hated the idea at first. Moving felt like admitting defeat, like letting her push me out of the space I'd tried to make mine. But the truth was undeniable. The loft no longer felt like it belonged to me. It belonged to her shadow. So, at the start of the new year, Ethan and I packed our things. We found a small 2-bedroom on the east side, newer, brighter, With locks I installed myself and windows that looked out onto a busy street instead of a quiet alley. The difference was immediate. I could breathe again, even if every stranger's glance still made my pulse race. The first night in the new apartment, Ethan and I ordered greasy takeout, watched old movies, and for the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. But the scar remained. I double-checked every lock before bed, kept my phone within reach, and never again invited someone into my home without knowing them far better than a few hours in a bar could provide. Clara was never found. Sometimes I catch myself wondering where she is. If she's moved on to another city, another bar, another unsuspecting face to smile at. Maybe she still thinks of me as one of her successes, just another mark. But I try not to let that thought define me anymore. Instead, I pour it into my art. My sketches now carry weight, not just color and form, but experience, the tension of trust and betrayal. Friends and coworkers comment on how much more powerful my work feels, and though I don't tell them why, I know. The pain left a mark, but it also sharpened something in me. Ethan was right. Outlasting her was the only victory I could claim. She had taken things, shaken me to my core, but I refused to let her steal the rest of my life. What I learned from that autumn in Portland was simple, but harsh. Not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions, and not every connection is safe. Sometimes danger comes not with threats, but with laughter and warmth, designed to disarm. Trust is powerful, but it should be earned, not handed over in the hope of companionship. The world is full of people who will surprise you with kindness, but it also has those who weaponize it. And the hardest part isn't losing your belongings. It's the betrayal, the realization that someone studied your life just to tear it open. But even in that darkness, there's strength in surviving. There's power in reclaiming your space, your art, your laughter. Betrayal may leave scars, but scars are proof that you endured, and that you can choose to live wiser, stronger, and more careful than before. Long before the fear set in, before the nights of pacing the floors with a bat in hand and shadows pressed against our windows, there was only the steady rhythm of friendship and the restless pulse of early adulthood. Liam and I had known each other since we were awkward middle school kids with braces and mismatched sneakers. He was the one who recorded every clumsy crush I confessed and every dumb stunt I pulled, storing them away like ammunition for the future. But he was also the first person who showed up when my parents fought. The one who sat with me in the driveway until the shouting inside quieted. By the summer of 2019, we were 21 and still tethered to each other. We rented half of a duplex on 34th Street in Minneapolis, a 2-bedroom place with peeling paint and a drafty kitchen window. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I had just started my first full-time job at an architecture firm, stuck in the lowly role of junior designer, pushing paper more often than drawing. Liam was a freelancer, always with his camera, wandering the city and finding ways to make light bend to his will. He loved photographing alleys at dusk, strangers' faces and half-smiles, puddles that caught reflections no one else noticed. We were opposites in energy. My days were rigid, office hours, deadlines, late nights staring at spreadsheets of budgets instead of sketches. Liam drifted, following his instincts and returning at odd hours, the smell of rain or cigarettes clinging to his jacket. But we balanced each other. He pulled me out of my work tunnel. I pulled him back when he drifted too far. That June, my own life was weighed down by a breakup that had left me sleepless. My nights were restless, my brain stuck in rewind, revisiting every word I'd said wrong. Liam teased me for it, but underneath, he worried. He saw the insomnia carving into me. The way my appetite shrank, the way I lingered too long in silence. One night, June 17th, I dragged myself home from another 12-hour day, briefcase still clutched like a lifeline, and found him pacing in the living room. His camera bag was slung over his shoulder, lens cap dangling like a pendulum, swinging with his every step. His face was pale, his usual joking grin nowhere in sight. "You won't believe what happened today," he said, his voice tight. "What now?" I muttered, kicking off my shoes. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the window. "I think someone's been following me." At first I thought he was exaggerating. Liam had a tendency to dramatize. But then he explained how he'd been photographing a street festival downtown, kids dancing in neon lights, the rhythm of drums pounding in his ears. And then he noticed a man, tall, wiry, dressed in plain clothes but with eyes that fixed on him too long. He brushed it off, moved down a block, yet the man was still there. Moved again, still there, always a few paces behind. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Conviction. "Maybe it was coincidence," I said, but my voice lacked. It didn't feel like it, and later, he swallowed, just standing there, watching. He showed up near here, across the street. That was the first night we double-checked our locks 3 times. That was the night the duplex began to feel smaller, walls pressing in as if danger had crept into the foundation itself. The days that followed carried a tension that hummed beneath the surface of our routines. Liam stopped wandering as freely, though he tried to act like nothing was wrong. His camera sat idle more often, his usual spark dimmed. I buried myself in work, but I couldn't shake the thought of him being shadowed in silence, someone memorizing his routes. 2 weeks later, on June 29th, we decided to break the cycle, said, trying for casual. "It'll feel normal. We need normal. Let's go grab a coffee." Liam. We walked to a cafe a few blocks away, a small place tucked between a laundromat and a record store. The air smelled of espresso and cinnamon, a comfort I hadn't realized I craved. For a moment, it did feel normal. We talked about the mural on the cafe wall, about a potential client who had emailed Liam. Then he appeared. The man. He stepped into line behind us as though he belonged there, but his eyes locked too quickly on Liam. His presence was sharp, invasive. He leaned in slightly, voice low but direct. "You're the photographer, right? The one from the festival?" Liam froze, his hand tightening around the strap of his bag. "Yeah," he said carefully. The man asked questions. Too many, too precise. He wanted to know what Liam shot with, where he usually worked, if he ever photographed at night alone. His gaze was unrelenting, a kind of hunger that made my skin crawl. I stepped closer, breaking the line of sight. Then I felt. "We're just here for coffee," I said, my tone firmer. The man smiled thinly, but it didn't reach his eyes. He backed off just enough, yet even as we collected our drinks, I could feel him watching. Liam's hands trembled as he sipped his cup, the liquid sloshing dangerously near the rim. We left quickly, the sense of pursuit heavy in every step home. Liam tried to brush it off once we were back in the duplex, saying, "Maybe he's just weird, curious." But his voice shook. Neither of us believed his words. That was the night the messages started. An unknown number pinged Liam's phone with vague phrases. "Nice walk tonight. You shouldn't leave your windows open. The duplex looks quiet when you're gone." At first, we laughed nervously, convincing ourselves it was some twisted prank. But the messages grew more detailed, referencing our routines, the color of the shirt Liam had been wearing, the time I usually returned from work. One night, I came home late to find the front door ajar. My heart stopped. Inside, the lights were off, shadows stretched across the walls. "Liam?" I whispered. No answer. Then, a faint sound, a whisper from the bedroom closet. I opened the door to find him crouched inside, pale and shaking. "I think he's here," Liam whispered. "Don't make a sound." Every creak of the house became an alarm bell, every flicker of passing headlights a threat. We locked ourselves in the bedroom that night, barricading the door with chairs, phones clutched in our hands. We didn't sleep. And in the silence, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. Someone was dismantling the fragile safety of our lives piece by piece. After that night in the closet, something shifted between us. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were partners in survival. Every decision felt heavier. We argued about whether to call the police, but Liam resisted. What do we even tell them? That some guy asked me questions and sent creepy texts? They'll laugh us out of the station. He wasn't entirely wrong. Without evidence, it would be our word against silence. But silence can be the loudest thing in the world. We tried to normalize our days, though nothing felt normal anymore. I noticed Liam keeping the blinds shut at all hours, his camera untouched on the kitchen table. He started walking with his shoulders hunched as if trying to fold himself smaller. I kept offering reassurances. It's fine, it'll blow over. But inside, dread coiled tighter each day. Then, one evening, around 10 p.m., I came home from work and noticed the porch light flickering. I reached for the door handle, but it was already unlocked. My stomach flipped. Inside, everything looked normal, until I reached the kitchen. A single Polaroid photo lay on the counter. It was of me. Walking home from work the day before, briefcase in hand, head down. The angle was unmistakable. Someone had been close enough to capture me without my knowledge. "Liam!" I shouted, panic ricocheting in my voice. He ran in, eyes widening at the photo. His hands shook as he picked it up. "He was here," he whispered. "Inside." That was the moment we realized this man wasn't just watching. He was infiltrating. The days blurred into paranoia. We took turns staying awake at night, listening for footsteps for any shift in the air. I started carrying a flashlight and pepper spray everywhere. Liam kept his camera by the window, hoping to catch proof. Every knock at the door, every buzz of my phone made my chest seize with panic. The messages grew bolder. "Nice picture on the counter, huh? I like the way fear looks on you. You should smile more when you're walking home." We tried to trace the number, but it was always blocked or disposable. I begged Liam to go to the police now that we had evidence, but he shook his head. If he knows we're involving them, what if it escalates? What if he comes inside again? The unspoken truth was worse. What if he already had? One night, exhaustion finally claimed me. I drifted off on the couch, only to wake with the distinct sensation of being watched. My eyes snapped open to the silhouette of a figure outside the window. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then the figure moved, fast, vanishing into the darkness. I screamed for Liam, who came running, grabbing his camera, snapping photos through the blinds. All we caught was blur, a shadow fleeing into the night. That was the night Liam said what neither of us had wanted to admit. Whispered, "He's not just watching, he's waiting. He's hunting us." By the end of June, our duplex was no longer a home. It was a cage. The air inside felt stale, thick with fear. We barely spoke except in whispers, both of us jumpy at the smallest sounds. Liam's face was drawn, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. I knew I didn't look much better. We tried to outsmart the man, setting small traps, pieces of tape across the door frames, flowers scattered near the windowsills. Every morning we'd check, and twice we found the tape torn, the flowers smeared with footprints too large to be either of ours. He was still coming inside. On June 30th, just past 1 a.m., the confrontation we'd been dreading finally arrived. I woke to the sound of scratching near the side entrance, a faint metallic squeal. My heart pounded as I shook Liam awake. "He's here," I whispered. We crept to the window, careful not to make noise. And there he was, the man. Tall, wiry, crouched near the side door, working a lockpick with steady hands. The porch light caught his face, and I felt bile rise. The cold determination in his expression was worse than any mask. This wasn't random. He wanted inside. Liam snapped a photo, the shutter too loud in the silence. The man's head jerked up. For a split second, our eyes locked through the glass. His gaze was sharp, like a knife pressed against skin. Then he lunged at the door. "Call the police!" I shouted, fumbling for my phone. Liam grabbed a chair, shoving it under the doorknob. The man banged against it, the frame rattling, our whole world trembling with the force. My fingers shook as I dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher, "He's trying to break in, he's here, please hurry." The banging stopped. Silence fell so suddenly it felt suffocating. Then came footsteps retreating into the night. Sirens wailed in the distance minutes later, but by then he was gone. The police swept the yard, found scratch marks on the lock, footprints in the dirt. They took our statements, nodded sympathetically, but I could see it in their eyes. Doubt, frustration, a sense that we were just another late-night call in a city full of them. They promised patrols, but we knew better. Patrols came and went. He was patient. That night, neither of us spoke. We packed bags in silence, stuffing clothes, cameras, and essentials into duffels. By sunrise, we left the duplex behind, hearts heavy, minds racing. We found a temporary sublet across town, higher floors, secure locks, multiple cameras. But safety wasn't instant. It never is. Even in the new place, I flinched at shadows, jumped at unexpected noises. Liam slept with his camera in his lap, as if it could ward off whatever evil had taken root in our lives. We tried to laugh again, to rebuild the fragile sense of normalcy, but it was forced, brittle. One evening, as we sat in silence, Liam finally spoke. "Do you think he'll find us again?" I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know, and not knowing was worse than anything else. Moving didn't erase the fear, it only relocated it. The sublet was safer, higher up, with better locks and no hidden entrances. But safety is a fragile illusion once it's been broken. Every night, I double-checked the deadbolt 3 times. Liam angled his camera toward the windows as if he could capture shadows before they reached us. We lived on edge, breathing in half-gasps, never fully resting. The first week passed in uneasy silence. Then the messages started again. They came to my phone this time, an unknown number. New view, same habits. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I showed Liam, and for a long moment, he just stared at the screen. "He found us," he said quietly, voice hollow. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the idea that it was coincidence or some cruel prank. But deep down, I knew. He was still out there, watching, tracking, waiting. We debated what to do. Liam argued for going to the police again, armed with the new message and the photos we had. "At least we have something concrete now," he said, his voice firm but shaky. "We can't keep running forever." I hesitated. My trust in the system was thin. The first time, they hadn't done much. But I realized we didn't have another choice. Fear had already stolen so much from us. Our home, our sleep, our peace. I refused to let it take more. We gathered everything. The Polaroid, the scratched locks, the photos of the shadow outside the window, and now, the threatening texts. We went to the police station the next morning. To our surprise, they took us seriously this time. The detective who interviewed us leaned forward, listening intently, his jaw tight as we explained. "If he's escalated to breaking and entering, he won't stop," the detective said. "You were lucky." That word, lucky, rang in my ears. Lucky that he hadn't gotten inside. Lucky that the chair held against the door. Lucky that the flashing sirens scared him off. Luck, not safety, was what we had been living on. The investigation dragged on, weeks turning into months. They traced the number, found nothing but disposable phones. They canvassed the area near our old duplex, collected testimonies from neighbors, but he'd vanished like smoke. Liam and I tried to piece ourselves back together. We found a permanent apartment downtown, high-rise, with a doorman and secure entry. For the first time in months, I slept without barricading the bedroom door. But sleep was never deep. Sometimes I'd wake in the night and swear I heard footsteps in the hallway, or I'd feel eyes on me in a crowd and panic would bloom in my chest. Liam, too, carried the scars. He barely touched his camera anymore, afraid of the memories tied to it. His art, the thing he loved most, had been poisoned by fear. One evening in August, We sat on the balcony watching the city lights, the sounds of traffic rising below. Liam turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about how different we'd be if none of this happened?" I thought about it. The answer was yes. Without the fear, the paranoia, the late nights whispering in closets, and the constant dread, we would have been freer, lighter, maybe happier. But I also thought about how it bound us together, how survival had forged a friendship that would never break. "We survived," I said simply. "That's what matters." He nodded, quiet for a while. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "Have to feel so much like losing. I just wish surviving didn't." That night, I realized something I carry with me even now. The world is not always kind, and safety is never guaranteed. But when everything falls apart, the people who stand with you in the dark, they are the closest thing to safety you will ever have. The experience with the stalker taught me a truth I'll never forget. Danger often hides in plain sight, and it's easy to underestimate how far someone will go to take control of your life. Fear can consume you, hollow you out, and steal the simplest joys. But it also reveals who you can trust, who will stand by you when the walls close in. In the end, survival isn't just about locks or cameras. It's about resilience, about refusing to let fear define you, and about holding on to the people who keep you grounded when the world feels unsafe. Some friendships are built like scaffolding around your life. They keep you standing when the world tries to push you over, and no matter how much weight you're carrying, they hold fast. That was Nora for me. We met in middle school, two awkward kids with mismatched sneakers and oversized backpacks clinging to each other because no one else really understood us. By the time we turned 20, we had endured family fights, bad boyfriends, small-town gossip, and the endless pressure of figuring out who we were supposed to be. By May of 2020, we were living in a weathered seaside cottage at 77 Harbor Lane in Seaview, Maine. The house had peeling paint and windows that rattled in the wind, but it was ours. The salty air drifted through the thin walls. The cries of gulls woke us in the mornings, and the distant foghorn lulled us to sleep at night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was freedom. And in those fragile years between adolescence and adulthood, freedom was everything. I worked nights at the Seaview Diner, balancing trays of greasy lobster rolls and mugs of coffee for truckers who didn't tip. The money was lousy, and my feet ached constantly, but it was the only job I could find after dropping out of community college. Nora was still enrolled at the university, slogging through her last semester of environmental science. She lived on caffeine and group projects, constantly stressed but determined. We often missed each other's rhythms. I came home when she was already asleep, and she left for campus when I was trying to claw a few hours of rest. Yet no matter how thinly life stretched us, we carved out space for each other. Nights on the porch with 2 cans of cheap soda, afternoons wandering the rocky shore, even 5-minute conversations in the kitchen before running out the door. Those were the lifelines that kept us tethered. That May had been particularly rough for me. Rent was overdue again. My mom kept calling about my younger sister's accident back home, and exhaustion dug deep into my bones. Nora watched me closely, as if she knew I was one more disappointment away from breaking. One Friday night, as I dragged myself through the cottage door after another double shift, she grabbed my wrist and said, "You need to come out with me tonight. I don't care how tired you are, you're not rotting in this house." Her eyes were serious, her tone unyielding. I started to argue, but I saw the pleading beneath her stubbornness. She needed it too. "Fine," I sighed, "but I'm not wearing anything fancy." By 10:45 that night, we were walking into the Tides Inn, a sprawling resort perched on the edge of the harbor. It smelled of polished wood and salt water, and the stage was set for a small comedy show. I hadn't laughed in weeks, but as the comedian cracked jokes about Maine lobstermen and clueless tourists, I felt something loosen inside me. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I was just a 20-year-old kid with my best friend, laughing too hard at corny jokes. But peace is slippery. It never stays in your hands for long. After the show, Nora and I lingered by the bar, sipping sodas and soaking in the buzz of chatter. I felt lighter than I had in weeks, maybe months. Then he appeared. He was tall, late 20s maybe, with a clean shirt that didn't quite match the rest of him. His smile was too confident, his eyes too sharp. He slid onto the stool next to us like he had been waiting for the moment. "Great show, huh?" he said, voice smooth. "That second set, especially the bit about the parking tickets, brilliant." His words landed oddly. He wasn't just commenting, he was reciting. He listed punchlines almost word for word as if he had memorized the performance. I tried to laugh politely, but a small unease stirred in my chest. Nora, sharper than me, caught it instantly. She leaned closer and whispered, "Don't leave your drink unattended." The man didn't seem to notice our discomfort. "You two want to meet the comedian?" he asked. "I can take you backstage. I know the manager." His smile stretched wide, like a salesman closing a deal. Everything in me screamed no, but stress had left me reckless. A part of me craved adventure, anything to distract from the grind of my days. Nora hesitated, glancing at the hallway. "Just a quick peek," she finally muttered. "If it feels wrong, we leave." We followed him into the back corridors of the resort. The walls were painted beige, lined with signs reading, "No trespassing," and "Authorized staff only." The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Each step echoed too loudly. Each turn felt deeper into someplace we weren't supposed to be. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he really did know someone. Maybe this was just how backstage areas looked, but my gut clenched tighter with every corner. Nora walked beside me, her jaw tense, her hand brushing mine as if to reassure me, or herself. Then it happened. The man suddenly bolted forward, sprinting down the hall. Shouts erupted and resort security guards burst into view. Before I could make sense of it, rough hands grabbed us. "What the hell are you doing back here?" one guard barked. We just," I stammered, panic flooding me. The man was already pinned against the wall, thrashing as they cuffed him. One guard kept hold of Nora and me, suspicion burning in his eyes. "You with him?" "No!" Nora shouted, her voice steady despite the terror in her face. "He said he knew the manager." "We don't even know him." It felt like hours before they believed us. Finally, after relentless questioning, they released us with curt warnings. The adrenaline drained from my body, leaving me shaky and hollow. Nora grabbed my hand and we walked out into the cool night, the salty air hitting us like a slap. We didn't speak until we were halfway home. Then Nora said quietly, "We were idiots." I couldn't argue. The cottage at 77 Harbor Lane looked different that night when we returned. The porch light flickered faintly, the sea breeze rattled the loose shutters, and the whole place seemed to lean away from us, like even it sensed what had happened. I'd always thought of our home as shabby but safe, tucked away at the end of a quiet lane, the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever happened. But after that night, the walls felt thinner, the locks weaker, and the silence heavier. We sat at the kitchen table in our damp jackets, staring at our untouched cups of tea. Neither of us could shake the feeling of hands gripping our arms, or the sound of that man sprinting ahead of us. "What do you think he wanted?" I asked, though my voice trembled. Nora rubbed her forehead, her messy hair falling across her face. "He wasn't after us. He was after the comedian. Didn't you hear the guard? He's been showing up at shows, trying to sneak backstage." "Yeah," I muttered, "but he pulled us into it." That was the part I couldn't shake. If the guards hadn't stopped him, what would have happened? Would we have been left standing in some service corridor, wondering why he led us there? Or worse, would we have been caught in the crossfire of whatever he had planned? The days that followed should have brought relief, but instead, they bred paranoia. I caught myself jumping whenever footsteps echoed behind me on the boardwalk. Nora insisted we lock the cottage at all times, even when we were home, even when we were only stepping out to the porch. She taped cardboard over the small bathroom window because, as she put it, anyone could look in. At night, the incident replayed in my mind. I heard his voice, too smooth, too rehearsed. I saw his eyes when he leaned too close, his words echoing like a script. I'd never realized how quickly trust could be manufactured, and how dangerous that trust could be. One evening, about a week later, I came home from the diner around midnight. The street was empty, the ocean hidden in the darkness beyond the dunes. As I fumbled for my keys, I thought I saw a figure at the end of Harbor Lane, just standing there, watching. I blinked, heart racing, but when I looked again, the spot was empty. Inside, Nora was awake on the couch, her textbook spread around her. She looked up, reading my face instantly. "What is it?" "Nothing," I lied, though my hands were still shaking as I set down my bag. We didn't talk about it, but the silence between us carried the weight of unspoken fear. We were both waiting for something to happen, even if we didn't know what. By the second week of June, Seaview felt smaller, almost suffocating. Word had spread about the incident at the Tides Inn. Small towns have a way of magnifying stories, and soon we were the girls who almost got lured backstage. Some people teased us. "What were you thinking following him?" While others looked at us with pity. Either way, it left me raw. Nora reacted differently. She grew sharper, more protective. She walked me to work when she could, double-checked the locks before bed, and carried pepper spray in her backpack. "I don't care if I look paranoid," she told me one night. "I'm not letting us get blindsided again." I admired her resolve, but it also scared me. It was as if the world we'd once trusted, casual conversations with strangers, evenings out in public, even walking home at night, had shifted into something more sinister. Then came the call from resort security. They wanted statements. The man had been formally banned from the premises, but apparently he was still showing up in town, asking questions about the comedian, about staff, about 2 girls who were there that night. My stomach dropped when Nora relayed the message to me. "He knows about us," I whispered. Nora didn't flinch. "Then we make sure he doesn't get close." That night, I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of gravel crunching outside the cottage. I froze, listening, my heart hammering. The sound lingered for a moment, then faded. When I finally worked up the courage to peek through the blinds, the lane was empty, bathed in moonlight. I told Nora in the morning, expecting her to dismiss it as a dream, but instead she nodded grimly. "He's testing us, seeing if we scare easy." "We do scare easy," I said, my voice breaking. "We're 20, Nora. We're not built for this." She reached across the table, gripping my hand. "Maybe not. But we're not going to let him win. You hear me? We survived that night because we stuck together. That's how we'll keep surviving." Her words steadied me, but the fear lingered. Every shadow on the boardwalk, every unfamiliar face in town, every creak of the cottage floorboards carried suspicion. The easy laughter we once shared had been replaced with quiet glances, a code between us that said, "Stay alert, don't trust, keep moving." And yet, under the fear, our bond grew sharper, stronger. If he was out there, watching, then at least we had each other. The summer of 2020 will always live in my memory as the season the ocean stopped feeling safe. Before then, Seaview was my comfort, the smell of salt, the lazy rhythm of the tide, the chorus of seagulls overhead. But after that night at the Tides Inn, the water seemed to hold secrets, the horizon looked too wide, and every stranger carried the weight of possibility, good or bad. It all came to a head in mid-July. Nora and I had started to avoid going out after dark, keeping to daylight hours whenever we could. I'd taken extra shifts at the diner, while she buried herself in summer classes online. Our lives shrank to the cottage, the boardwalk, and work. Even so, the sense of being watched never disappeared. One Saturday around 9:30 p.m., Nora insisted we go out for ice cream. She said, trying to sound casual, but with a sharp edge in her voice. Then he already won. "We can't hide forever. If we let him control us," we walked down Harbor Lane, the air thick with the scent of fried dough and the distant sound of live music drifting from the pier. For the first time in weeks, I felt almost normal. We bought cones, sat on a bench by the water and tried to laugh like before. Then Nora froze mid-bite. Her eyes locked on a figure leaning against a lamppost across the street. He wasn't looking directly at us, but his body language was too still, too deliberate. I didn't need to ask who she thought it was. "Don't panic," she whispered. "Finish your ice cream." Then we walked back, slow, together. My stomach flipped, but I obeyed. We rose and walked calmly down the street, every step deliberate. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. My pulse hammered in my ears. When we turned onto Harbor Lane, Nora leaned close and whispered, "We're calling the police." Back at the cottage, her hands shook as she dialed. I paced the room, listening to her explain everything. The incident at the resort, the phone calls, the figure near the pier. The dispatcher promised to send someone, though I could hear the doubt in her tone. An hour later, flashing blue lights painted the cottage walls. 2 officers spoke to us, nodding, writing notes, asking for descriptions. But when they checked the pier, the man was gone. The police suggested we be cautious and offered to increase patrols near Harbor Lane, but there wasn't much else they could do. After they left, Nora sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "They don't believe us," she whispered. "Then we believe each other," I said, sitting beside her. "That's enough." The rest of the summer passed in a haze of vigilance. We saw him twice more, or maybe we just thought we did. A shadow near the dunes, a figure at the end of the lane. By August, when Nora moved back to campus housing for her senior year, I stayed in the cottage alone. The silence was deafening. Every creak made me jump, every knock at the door sent my heart racing. But slowly, time dulled the edges of the fear. I found comfort in routine, locking the doors, checking the cameras, keeping my phone nearby. Nora and I called often, reminding each other that the worst was behind us, even if the memory never fully faded. Looking back now, I realize the man never truly stole from us, not in the way he intended. What he left instead was a scar, yes, but also a reminder. Safety is fragile, trust is earned, and friendship can be the anchor in the storm. That summer in Seaview taught me that danger doesn't always appear with warning signs or dramatic entrances. Sometimes it hides in casual smiles, in the false charm of strangers, or in the moments when you let your guard down because you want to believe the world is kinder than it really is. But it also taught me something more powerful, that friendship can be the shield you never knew you needed. Fear isolates you, but trust, real, tested trust, and keeps you grounded. Nora and I learned that survival isn't just about locks or cameras or police reports. It's about holding on to the people who see you at your weakest and remind you you're not alone. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all. The world will always hold shadows, but with the right people beside you, you don't have to face them alone. They say some places die slowly, not from a fire or foreclosure or anything dramatic, but from something quieter, a kind of slow rot. Our Dollar Tree was one of those places. I started working there during my second year of community college. It was a part-time gig, a way to pay for gas and groceries while juggling night classes and family responsibilities. The store sat at the edge of town, tucked between a vacant dry cleaner and a check-cashing joint. Quiet, mostly. Just older folks on fixed incomes, single moms, the occasional high schooler grabbing snacks after class. Nothing dramatic ever happened there. At least, not until the man in the hoodie showed up. That day had started like any other. It was early November, cold and gray with a wind that made the automatic doors whistle. I clocked in at 2:58 p.m., tossed on my green apron, and checked the restocking list Kelly had taped to the counter. Aisle 4, seasonal. That meant leftover Halloween clearance, plastic pumpkins, fake leaves, turkey-themed paper plates. Not a fun aisle, but an easy one to stock since nobody lingered there. I wheeled my cart over, earbuds in, and got to work. About 30 minutes in, I glanced up and noticed someone standing at the far end of the aisle. He was tall, 6 feet at least, wearing a navy hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. He wasn't holding a basket, didn't seem to be browsing, just standing. Still. I figured he was zoning out or waiting for someone, so I gave him a quick, "Hey there, let me know if you need anything." No response. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't rude, it just felt blank. I shrugged it off, turned back to my shelf of scarecrow figurines, and kept working. An hour passed. I'd stocked the next aisle and came back for a second box of items. He was still there. Same spot, same posture, facing forward like a statue. This time I felt a weird tug in my stomach. Not fear exactly, just unease. I approached him again, a little more direct. "Hey man, you good? Need help finding anything?" Again, no answer, just that slow nod. I couldn't see his eyes under the hood, but something about him, the stillness, the silence, felt off. Not aggressive, not dangerous, just wrong. I told Kelly. She peeked down the aisle, saw him and sighed. "He's probably just tired, might be homeless," she said, "causing trouble, let him be. We don't kick people out unless they're..." And so we did, but the weirdness didn't stop there. Around 5:30, an older lady whispered to me while I was walking past the registers. "That man in aisle 4, she said, clutching her purse tighter. "He hasn't blinked once, I swear I watched him for 10 minutes. Another customer chimed in near the freezer section. "Looks like he's in some kind of trance." "He gives me the creeps," she muttered. I tried not to let it get to me, but I started feeling it too. That aisle began to feel colder, heavier, like walking through air that had been holding its breath too long. When my break rolled around, I slipped into the back office and pulled up the security feed. The cameras weren't high-tech, just grainy black and white loops on a 10-second delay. But there he was, plain as day, standing in aisle 4, not moving, not shopping. The timestamp said he'd been there since 2:10, almost an hour before I even started my shift. He never looked at anything, never touched a product, just stood there. And that's when I noticed the worst part. In every clip I scrubbed through, he never moved a muscle. I watched the footage over and over, scrubbing back and forth between timestamps. At 2:10 p.m. the man appeared, just stepped into the edge of the aisle from the left side of the frame. No sound, of course, but his movement was stiff, deliberate, almost robotic. He walked halfway down the aisle, turned toward the shelf of plastic wreaths and fake gourds, and then stopped. And that was it. From that point on, frame after frame, he just stood there. I watched until my break ran out, half expecting something to jump out at me from the screen. But there was no jump scare, no glitch, no flicker of a hand reaching out. Just that figure. Still, silent, present in every frame until I finally closed the tab and returned to the floor. The rest of my shift was uneventful, at least on the surface. I stocked, I bagged, I greeted, but I kept glancing down aisle 4, and every time I saw him, still rooted to the same spot, never moving, barely reacting to the world around him. At 8:45 p.m., just before closing, I finally asked Kelly again, maybe call someone? You want me to go talk to him? Or she was counting bills at the register, clearly tired. And if he doesn't leave, I'll call non-emergency. It's late. We'll tell him we're closing in 10. I nodded, but something felt wrong. I don't know how to explain it. Just that weird weight in my chest, like I'd left a door open in my house and couldn't remember if I locked it. At 8:54 p.m., I walked down aisle 4 again, determined to say something. But he was gone. I froze. I didn't hear him leave. No footsteps. No door chime. The aisle was just empty. Like he'd never been there at all. I ran to the front. Did the guy in the hoodie just leave? I asked Kelly. She looked up. No. I thought he was still back there. I checked the side exit. Locked. I checked the front. No one in the parking lot. I even went outside for a minute, scanning the sidewalk, as if he'd just casually walked into the night. But he hadn't. He'd vanished. Kelly and I reviewed the security feed together after close. She fast-forwarded to 8:53 when the man was still standing there. Same spot, same posture. Then the camera jumped to 8:54, gone. No fade, no footsteps, just gone. One frame he was there, the next, he wasn't. Kelly frowned. "That's probably just a glitch," she said, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. The camera didn't skip, didn't distort. It just didn't show him leaving. She didn't talk much after that. Neither did I. We finished the close-up routine in silence, both a little shaken. I went home that night, staring at every shadow on the street, and I slept with my bedroom light on for the first time in years. But it didn't end there. The next day I worked a morning shift. Different crowd, same routine. Kids grabbing candy, moms arguing with toddlers, retirees counting out change 1 coin at a time. Normal, familiar. But I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the hoodie. Around 11:20 a.m., a customer, middle-aged guy, looked like a mechanic, flagged me down near the greeting cards. "Hey," he said quietly, nodding toward aisle 4. "You got someone doing inventory back there?" "No," I said. "Why?" He looked uneasy. "I just walked by and saw someone standing real still at the end of the aisle. Gave me a weird feeling. By the time I turned around, no one was there." I swallowed. "What did they look like?" He shrugged. "Tall, dark hoodie, kinda hunched. Didn't see his face." I thanked him, played it off like it was nothing, but my skin went cold. I walked over. The aisle was empty, shelves filled with leftover Thanksgiving stock, untouched, everything in place. Still, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, and from then on, it started happening more often. Customers would ask quietly, "Hey, is someone else back there with us?" Or, "Do you have mannequins or something for display?" One woman swore she saw a man standing behind her reflection in the freezer door, but when she turned, no one was there. Employees started joking about it. Dollar Tree ghosting, they called it. Harmless fun. But not to me, because I knew it wasn't just some story to pass the time. I'd seen the footage. I'd watched that man vanish into thin air, and I couldn't explain it. Then the cameras started acting up. Only the one facing aisle 4. Every day between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m., that feed would glitch, freeze, cut out entirely. The rest of the system worked fine. Garden supplies, frozen foods, candy aisle, all clear. Just aisle 4, and just during that time window. Kelly had maintenance look at it. They replaced the camera. Didn't help. They checked the wiring. Nothing. We even moved the camera to another aisle and tested it there. Worked perfectly. But put it back in aisle 4? Same problem. "It's the damn ghost," said Tyrese, the evening stock guy. He was half joking, but I could tell he didn't want to linger in that aisle either. I stopped going down aisle 4 unless I had to, and when I did, I moved fast. Kept my eyes on the shelves. Never stood still. Then one night I was closing alone. Kelly had left early. It was just me in the store, half lit and humming with old fluorescent lights. I was sweeping the front end when I heard something shift behind me. A soft scuff, like a shoe dragging across linoleum. I turned. Nothing there. I walked the aisles one by one, forcing myself to be logical. Probably a box shifting, or a customer who slipped out without me noticing. But when I reached aisle 4, I stopped cold. There, in the far mirror at the end of the aisle, a faint shape. Not in the aisle, in the reflection, standing just like before. Navy hoodie. Still, watching. I turned around. Empty. But when I looked back in the mirror, it was gone. After the mirror incident, I stopped pretending everything was fine. I didn't tell Kelly. I didn't want her to think I was losing it. But I knew what I saw. That shape. It wasn't a trick of the light or some tired hallucination. It was him, the man from the aisle. Back, but not really there. I started dreading my shifts. Every day at 2 p.m. like clockwork, I'd get a pit in my stomach. I'd find excuses to avoid aisle 4. I'd clean the freezer doors twice, volunteer to restock the candy shelves, anything to stay out of that space. But the sightings didn't stop. Customers began asking if we'd reopened a Halloween section. A kid, maybe 9 years old, told his mom, "The statue guy is back again," and pointed toward aisle 4. An old woman took one look down the aisle, went pale, and left her full basket behind. It wasn't just me anymore. Then came the night Kelly admitted it. We were in the back, closing together again for the first time in a week. I noticed she looked tired, really tired, and asked how she was holding up. She hesitated. "You ever feel like we brought something in we shouldn't have?" she asked quietly, almost like she was afraid the walls might hear her. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the security feed, where aisle 4 was once again a frozen blur. "The shipments," she said. "They started coming late October. Extra crates from corporate, Halloween overstock. But some of it wasn't even listed on inventory. Old decorations, props, some stuff that didn't have barcodes. I remember one box had a weird scarecrow doll with nails through its eyes. I tossed it in the dumpster. Next day, it was back in the stockroom, just sitting there. A chill ran through me. "Do you think it's... what? Haunted?" She laughed, but it was forced. "I think something came in, and now it doesn't want to leave." We didn't say much after that. We didn't have to. 3 days later, the regional manager visited, said it was a routine check, but the way he and the suit from corporate kept glancing at the cameras said otherwise. They stayed for 3 hours, pulled footage, didn't say a word to the rest of us. 2 weeks after that, a notice went up on the front door. "This location will be closing permanently effective December 15th. Low revenue," they said. But that didn't track. We were steady. Not great, but not failing either. The last day was weirdly quiet. No customers, no kids, no regulars. Just silence, like the building was already empty. Like we were walking through a memory. As I clocked out that final time, I passed aisle 4 one last time. The shelves were bare. No decor, no products, just metal racks and dust. But for a split second I saw him again, standing at the end. Still, silent. And then I blinked, and he was gone. I moved on. Took a new job at a local hardware store across town. Decent pay, better hours. Nothing weird, at least not yet. But sometimes, when I'm walking the aisles and I catch a glimpse of something in a mirror, I freeze. Just for a second, just to be sure. I never told anyone the full story. Not friends, not coworkers. It's the kind of thing that lives better in silence. People don't believe you anyway. They nod politely, say, "That's wild," and then avoid you after. But I still think about it, because it wasn't just about the man who stood in aisle 4. It was about how no one really noticed until it was too late. We were too used to things being broken. Cameras glitch. Weird people come in. Inventory gets messed up. We write it off. We minimize it. We move on. But there's a point where ignoring something lets it root in deeper. There was never any real explanation for what happened. No articles, no investigations, just a closed-down store, a few for lease signs, and a couple workers who probably don't talk about it anymore. I drove by the building last week. It's still empty. The windows are dusty, the signage removed. But the aisle shelves are still standing. And if you look closely, through the slatted blinds, you can just make out a figure in the back. Not moving. Watching. Waiting. Maybe he never left. Maybe he's part of the place now, buried in its bones. Or maybe, like Kelly said, something came through that we never understood, and it's just waiting for the next open door. Sometimes the scariest things don't come from monsters or ghosts. but from our habit of dismissing the unexplainable. We write things off because it's easier to believe a camera glitched than to admit something is wrong. But whether it's fear, danger, or something unnatural, ignoring the signs doesn't make them disappear. It only gives them room to grow. Always trust your instincts, even in aisle 4. I didn't expect much out of life after the divorce, and least of all from a temp agency. My name's Clint Reyes. I used to drive delivery trucks, hauling boxes across state lines. Not anymore. After a DUI and the end of a decade-long marriage, I landed night security shifts wherever they'd have me. Mostly small stores on the outskirts, quiet, empty, easy hours. Family Dollar on Alderbrook Avenue in Dayton was one of them. Supposed to be simple. 2 guards per shift, stay awake, walk the aisles, call in if anything trips. That first night I met Reuben Carter. Quiet guy, lean build, hoodie several sizes too big, looked like he could disappear if he wanted to. He had a backpack he never set down, ate his lunch in silence, never touched the vending machine. He arrived early, followed the checklist, circled alone. I told myself maybe I was just paranoid. I drained my coffee, watched surveillance monitors, tried to keep my thoughts to coffee and codeine-scarred insomnia. The job was supposed to be therapy, steady hours, passing time. Reuben didn't speak much. That suited me fine, until I overheard him whispering near aisle 2. One of the cameras he passed recorded him smiling softly right before he ducked into the break room. I followed, pushed the door open. Nobody. Break room empty, half lit from the hallway bulbs. Reuben was gone. No back door, no hiss of ventilation, just empty chairs. I left fast, heart thumping. Told myself not to think about it. But the building felt smaller after that. The tiles too crisp, the shelves too still. The second week I started keeping a small flashlight, for when the light switch bulb flickered, for when the stairwell light above the loading bay glitched out. I'm sober now, trying to rebuild. That meant staying sharp. I couldn't trust shadows, but Reuben worried me. He didn't answer questions, always parked his car in the same spot, wore gloves even when the air was warm. That made me alert. One night I showed him a picture on my phone, the family I grew up with, the delivery truck, my ex-wife's smiling face. He took the phone lightly, muscles tense. Without looking, he pushed it back. "They hear whispers," he said. I flinched. "What do you mean?" He just turned away, walked down aisle 5, touching shelves like he studied their arrangement. I pressed him again near the loading dock. That's when I saw the wet footprints, starting at the mop closet, trailing to his locker. But no mop, no bucket, nothing. The concrete floor had water rings, but there was no sink, no mop hook. I didn't say anything. I just watched. That's when my gut sank, a feeling I hadn't felt since the accident. Third week, same pattern. Quiet nights, routine checks. At midnight, I checked the footage. The camera by staff restroom caught Reuben entering at 12:43. He didn't emerge. No alarm, no sensor trigger. I rewound. Nothing. No person walking past, no door open, no footsteps. Yet, when I looked at him as he walked by later that hour, he was standing right behind me. My breath caught. I backed away slowly, turned the monitor off. Don't ask about it, I told myself. Stay clean, stay sober. 2 mornings earlier, I'd woken up shaking but didn't break. That night, after catching him in the restroom footage, I started carrying my phone in my pocket all the time. I searched the web quietly, found nothing. No criminal record, no temp logs beyond hours, no complaints filed, just a clean record of perfect shifts. He didn't sleep in the break room, and he never left the building until shift end. I noticed he whispered under his breath in mop room corners. Words I couldn't catch. I drank more water. I double-checked exits. I avoided him. That night I was reviewing monitors at 3:12 when the alarm went off. Not smoke detectors, but the fire alarm buzzing, lights flashing. The sprinklers stayed silent. Building had no smoke. I grabbed flashlight, jogged toward manager's office where the alarm seemed centered. I found Ruben crouched, kneeling in front of the door. Tiles peeled back, utility knife in hand. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. He didn't flinch, just looked up. Calm, distant. "Hear them, don't you? They're still down there. The ones they forgot." He pointed at the gap in the floor. My breath stuck. Beneath, in a crawlspace light coming from my torch, were small bones, human phalanges, laid across cheap plywood boards, scattered as if someone tried to keep them silent. I stumbled back. My stomach lurched. Memories of my wreck, the DUI, my ex crying. I backed toward the hallway. Clint Reyes, man who nearly destroyed his life and moved on, folding. My knees trembled. I ran to the front door and locked it behind me, sweaty, breath ragged. I called 911, voice shaky. "Somebody's digging bones in the store, under the floor." Police flooded in. We unlocked Ruben's section and let him out. He sat calmly by the hole, silent. Didn't resist. Said nothing more. The investigation revealed a sealed crawlspace beneath the store. Decades ago, the site had been a discount warehouse. Reports surfaced. Child labor scandal. Several kids went missing or died. No records survived. Company went bankrupt. Property sold to Family Dollar. No paperwork transferred. Nothing in public record. I quit 2 days later. Turned in gear. Broke the contract. They asked why. I said, health reasons. Needed to focus on better days. They nodded. Didn't press. That night I dreamt of Ruben whispering under my bed. Soft voice. No face. "You're not alone anymore." I wake in sweat. I avoid old warehouses. I don't talk about it much. It destroyed my peace more than my past ever did. I realize now, sometimes the quietest person is the keeper of the darkest secrets. You survive by listening. Trust your gut. And when the world buries truths in dusty crawl spaces, maybe your role is to dig them up before you leave the place standing. Sometimes the shadows where people hide secrets are right under your feet. Trust what your instincts whisper at midnight. Choose honesty and light over silence and safety. Rebuilding your life may mean unearthing painful truths, but only then can you truly walk away free.